Hi, I'm Ans de Vos. I'm professor at the Antwerp Management School and the University of Antwerp. And since the start of my career, more than 20 years ago now, I have been researching careers and how careers are evolving. And since almost 10 years, in 2011, we have, together with SD Works, started up a research chair, where we are more closely following up how careers are changing and what are some challenges pertaining to the future of careers as we experience it here in Belgium, but also abroad. So what I want to do in this talk is kind of take you through three kind of challenges that you might also be encountered with, but I would rather frame them as opportunities because if we look at careers in today's world of work and how they have changed compared to where we come from, let's say 50 years ago, there is an enormous range of opportunities that you can embrace while thinking about embarking your own career, but yet at the same time it will also be important to realize what might be some of the mindsets that we still have or that employers still have that kind of keep us in this old way of thinking about what a career and what career success is. So I want to take you through this into three steps. First of all, by considering a bit further, like what is a career in fact, and then looking at how career management and career self-management actually also means good career stakeholder management. And then I'm going to conclude with today's context, which is really challenging us in many dimensions when we look at the sanitary crisis that we're faced with, looking at how well can you prepare yourself in a career and can you predict your career in some way. So the first message I want to give you is to think carefully about what is the meaning of a career and how has this changed, but also what is kind of still the mental model that you might have about your own career. What we see over the past 50 years is that the view that we have had, the shared idea of what is a career, has really changed in the sense that a traditional view of a career was for a long time kind of the linear upward movement that you make throughout your professional working life. So it was a kind of a very predictable image where you might say it is very clear what you need to acquire in terms of skills or experience in order to make a next step, and often the next step is with the same employer in kind of the same type of a job, but just at a higher level in the hierarchy. So this is kind of an image that also when you hear me talking about it might not be very stimulating or motivating because it is so predictable, but yet also we see that it has become outdated for many reasons. One of those reasons is that employers simply can no longer make these kind of predictable career steps because simply the environment has become so unpredictable. So how can you as an organization make predictable promises about the next steps that people can follow if as an organization you are not sure about how the next year will look like? So there is another reason also why it is changing this idea or challenging us to look at another meaning of career is that careers are becoming much longer. We see on average like the career retirement age was around 60 years in Belgium, or is still early 60s, but it will simply be a fact that we will have to be working longer. So during those 40+ working years, it will be the question like, is it realistic to expect that we can just stick to do the same things that we have in our backpack when we graduate, when we leave school? Isn't it more realistic to go to a view on careers where we say, well, after a couple of years, I have developed several competencies and I've developed self-insight into what I'm good at, what I like to do, what I want to develop further. Maybe now it's time to go to another employer, to start as an independent, maybe even to start studying again to develop something completely new. Because in that way we can kind of rejuvenate ourselves throughout our professional career. So instead of the image of this kind of a staircase, you might kind of try to stretch your thinking about your own careers in terms of learning cycles. And a learning cycle that also brings the idea of a career really back to the essence where it's all about. It is really about the work that you do on a daily basis. You might in fact say that by working on a daily basis, by doing your work every day, you also work on your career. And with a learning cycle ID, I then refer to the evolution that you might experience when you start in a new job. You first of all have to learn to do the things right. You have to make sure you obtain your results, that you fulfill expectations. And after a while, you might realize, like, by doing it like this, or organize it myself like that, I might even do the things better. I might overperform. Until at a certain moment, you might realize you master the job, the context, the company so well that you might be able to decide for yourself where you put your priorities. So it is evolving from doing things right to doing things better to doing the right things in your roles. But yet at the same time, from the moment that you might be on top of such a curve, you might, on the one hand, feel a sense of fulfillment because you see people reward you for that. You might even see that on your payslip, that you have a good performance. People ask you for feedback, for advice, etc. It becomes kind of a routine also, and you might kind of come into a sort of a comfort zone. And then it might become time for yourself to wonder, how long do I want to stay in this comfort zone, or how long is it healthy to stay in this comfort zone? When is it time to step out of this job and start doing something new and start a new learning cycle? And that can be in the same company, in the same department, in another department, it can be in another organization. But it often means that when you change, you also start a little bit back in your learning curve, because you will have to use new competencies, get to know new people, etc. And through that, over time, develop again in this learning cycle to come at a new level of mastery. And if you look at a career from that perspective, you will see that over the years, you might be working towards a goal that you have set for yourself, or that you thought was the ambition you have for your career. But you might, through those learning cycles, work towards that goal, but yet at the same time you might also become more aware of what really matters to you, and you might change also through the experiences that you have. It might challenge you to question, like, what really matters to me, how important is this ambition to me, where do I really want to leave my mark? And it is that learning cycle ID that is very important if we think about what is a career nowadays, much more than this linear, predictable sequence of paths on a ladder. That's the first message. And if I look then at the second one, I have used already a lot of times the word you and I as an indicator that a career is something very individual. You are doing a job for a company, for an employer, if you work as a payroll employee at least. But that job, that is not something that you own. It is your employer who owns your job. But what is very important is to realize that the job does not coincide with a career. Your employer may own your job, and you might be unhappy when the employer decides to cut your job or change some of the core tasks. But the career is something that you own. And that is not owned by your employer. So it also means that the person who might maybe care the most of all of this career should be you. You should not expect this from your employer to care on your behalf of your career and the career learning cycles that you're going through. Yet at the same time, more than ever, the more that this individual approach to career comes more to the forefront compared to organizational career management many years ago, the more it will be important for yourself, on the one hand, to realize, what do I like, what do I want, what am I good at, what do I want to develop further, but without evolving into a setting where you think that it is all about you. Because a sustainable career, a career where you will be able to realize your career goals, means that you are well aware of your stakeholders around you. And your stakeholders are not only situated in your career context at work, but also at home, for instance. So it will be very important to consider, like in an organizational context, how can I build my social capital? So it's not only about what we do during the course of our working life, but also about who we meet in this working life, who can give us feedback about what we're successful in, but also like what could be something we should develop further. People who can bring us into contact with other people. And this social capital, the more also you see that there is a change of employers, the more you will also be realized that it is, the more you will also realize that it will be important to keep your network across the boundaries of your organization, because they will be the people that might be gatekeepers for next job opportunities of career steps, but they might also be very valuable in terms of kind of having interesting dialogues with you about your career. So being mindful of those stakeholders at work is important, but at least as important are the stakeholders at home, because a career decision that we make as an individual is always also affected by the context in which we live. And this context might evolve. When you are working as a single versus you are a young parent versus your spouse is moving a lot or working a lot abroad for his work. So there might be many circumstances that you have to kind of prioritize what people around you need in your private life and in your work life. And what we see also in research is that the most successful people in the end in their career who are able kind of to establish a healthy balance between what they want, what their employer needs, and what their stakeholders at home need, those are the ones who in the end often manage to work longer, but also to report a higher level of happiness, satisfaction, and mental well-being. So I think that will be a very important advice to take with you too. And in that sense, maybe a final thing I want to add here to in this second message is that striving for an organization that has a purpose where you can relate to, I think is very important, and is also challenging employers today to make that clear. But yet at the same time, what will be very important also for you, again, to see it as a win-win, is consider like, but what is my contribution? It's not only about me searching for a company who has a nice purpose where I can relate to as long as I need it or want it. It's also about turning it around and saying what is a contribution that I want to make given the values and the purpose I have, and how long should I also stay, and how much patience sometimes should I need to have to stay in a certain job, to work for a certain project until I leave a mark somewhere. Job hopping and more job mobility, I think, is important because it increases your social capital, your employability, but yet at the same time, if it becomes changing for the sake of changing, you might end up with starting a lot of things but never really accomplishing something, and then I think the idea of searching for a purpose becomes kind of a shallow wording. And to conclude, or to bring those two messages together in my third message, if we look at today's world of work, we still see in some way that organizations and also professionals are kind of trying to predict as much as possible their future. But we have seen over the past months that trying to predict and in a rational way, say like plan, do, check, that this is no longer working. So what we do see is that the most successful people in their careers are most often not the ones who have this perfect plan at the very start and start executing it according to the milestones they have set for themselves, but it are the people who are prepared for opportunities, but also for setbacks, by knowing who they are, when they are at their best, and what kind of values they have. So having that kind of a self-insight for yourself is actually the basis for being prepared for all kinds of changes. And if we look at careers and the skills for the future that will be so important for having a successful career where you have a continued employment, maybe interrupted sometimes with periods of unemployment or new learning or taking a step back for whatever reason, is that in this setting it will be important to develop kind of a resilience, to kind of develop a flexible attitude, to focus on changes around you and think about how you might learn to deal with those changes, even though you might be a person that prefers the predictability and the order and the structure. So those are in fact the critical skills for the future that we see popping up in international research, but also if we look at studies here in Belgium, studies we have done ourselves, this capability to adapt to change will become much more important than finding this perfect match between you and one kind of a career for a lifetime, where it is naive to think that neither you nor the context of that career will ever change during that whole period. So I wish you the best of luck with pursuing such a career, and thank you.